Today, we are hosting Turner Wyatt. Turner is a social entrepreneur focused on climate change via food waste prevention. He's the co-founder and CEO of the Upcycled Food Association, which aims to prevent food waste by growing the upcycled food economy. Turner began his fight against food waste in the food rescue movement, where he served as the co-founder and exec director of Denver Food Rescue. In 2015, he was appointed by the mayor of Denver to serve on the Denver Sustainability Food Policy Council, where he assisted in creating policies to make a more sustainable and just food system. Turner is the co-founder and board president of Fresh Food Connect, a nonprofit technology company focused on creating a market for homegrown food. He's also the recipient of the Outstanding Alumni Award from the University of Colorado, as well as Waste 360 40 Under 40 Award and the Top 20 Emerging Leaders in Food and Ag Award. He is based in Crested Butte, Colorado, where he spends his days of skiing, running, and climbing. And Turner just mentioned that he has a mountain right next to his office. Welcome, Turner. We are very happy to have you here. I have made you co-host, so if you have anything to share, you should be able to. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for inviting me to speak today. I'm looking forward to talking to everyone. I'm Turner, the CEO of the Upcycled Food Association, and looking forward to having a conversation with what I understand are mainly food science students. Is that still the case? If not, what else are people doing? Since we have a small group, just shout out. Yeah, if you're not a food science student, tell me what kind of context you're coming from. Biology.
Food science faculty, a couple of food science faculty that we are eager to learn from you.
Cool. Thanks, Monica. Yeah,
Welcome.
Same. Ag economics. Cool. Right on. Okay, so people are already kind of putting things into the chat. Definitely feel free to do that the whole time. I'll kind of keep it up as I'm chatting. And then also feel free to turn on your video or unmute yourself and just like ask questions throughout. That way we can kind of make it more of a conversation instead of just a presentation. And in that spirit, I want to make sure that I'm kind of focusing on what's most important to you all today. And so did anyone come with any kind of questions or things that you're wondering about? Shout out or put in the chat like anything you want me to make sure to talk about when it comes to food waste, upcycled food, or any questions that you came with today, or any thoughts, or just whatever.
I have plenty of questions. I'm going to let other people chime in, but I just want to know basically your entire journey of how you started or got involved with food waste, some of the biggest challenges you faced with upcycled food or food waste in general, food rescue, etc.
Okay, cool. Yeah, happy to share that. Any others?
I'm curious about kind of where you are right now with this Upcycled Food Association. I think I'm on the email list, and I think you have officially gotten like the designation. So I'd love to hear more about like what's going on with all that, and maybe explaining to everyone in the meeting what that is and what you guys are doing with that.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks, Katie. Happy to do that. Anything else? Okay, so yeah, so I can talk about those things, and then otherwise I'm gonna generally kind of talk about food waste, and I'll try to talk about it it's probably something that you all talk about a lot, so try to bring kind of a new frame to that if I can, in terms of food waste commercialization and valorization. And then I'm going to be talking about the Upcycled Food Association, the organization I currently work for. And then, yeah, like I said, just chime in and keep me on track with your questions and comments and stuff like that. So first I can answer the question about journey, just to get that out of the way. I started when I was in undergrad working for interning for a food rescue organization. And food rescue is a really cool space to work or volunteer in. Maybe some of you have volunteered for the local food rescues in Columbus, and I encourage you to do so if you haven't. It's really important work to reduce food waste and to address food insecurity, which is obviously super important this past year. And it's really great work. And I was also a little bit frustrated by how dependent upon donations these organizations tend to be in order to survive. So basically any nonprofit will tell you there's sort of a nonprofit industrial complex where you spend a lot of your energy just fundraising, asking for philanthropic donations and gifts to give you enough money to survive in the first place. And then there's money left over to do your mission, and it feels a little bit backwards. And so there's all this time and energy that you spend making money, and at the same time there's all this leftover food that you can't redistribute. Like there's way too much bread produced every day that all the food insecure people in the world could ever eat. Like there's just way more food going to waste than there are people to eat that food. And so there's like, that kind of illuminates the problem of our food distribution system, but it also illuminates an opportunity for food rescue organizations to make money by commercializing their otherwise wasted inventory themselves. And that led me to start organizations like Fresh Food Connect, which basically makes it easy for food rescuers to access homegrown food. And it's a chapter-based organization. And I don't think there's any chapters in Ohio. And so that would be a potential way for any entrepreneurs in the crowd to like do something really cool to hyper localize and make your local food system more sustainable. And then I also started a couple other businesses and projects, including one where we took the extra bagels that we would rescue. Again, there's way too many bagels that all the low income people, all the food insecure people could ever eat, but that doesn't mean they don't have value. So take those bagels, toast them into bagel chips, more shelf stable, they're gonna last longer, and you can sell them at a farmer's market for $6, and it makes a bunch of money for the organization. And you don't have to go out and beg for donations as much. So that project is one that I've talked to a couple people at Ohio State about, and I am curious at some point if we can get like a update on what's happening with that project, because I really want someone to pick it up. It's such a profitable business, and there is a huge opportunity for someone to make a lot of impact and a lot of money selling upcycled bagel chips. I'm going to say it right there. There you have it from the CEO of the Upcycled Food Association. If someone wants to go make a lot of money, make bagel chips. If you go to twicerounds.com, I think it is. I have no idea if this is the right URL. I think, oops, it didn't type the way that I wanted it to, but I would even consider gifting this brand that we developed around Twice Rounds bagel chips to whoever wanted to actually carry the torch and make this company. And the thing is, it's not only is it a cool social enterprise idea, but it truly can be used as a way to increase the capacity of organizations that are already doing cool stuff out there, like food rescue. So that was kind of my aha moment. We also had an aha moment of, again, bread, way too much bread. So we brewed the bread into beer, sold the beer at local restaurants, made a bunch of money for Denver Food Rescue. So the kind of the point here is like, it's not just a issue about the environment, even though we know that 20% of all fresh water and 25% of all arable land goes to produce food that is wasted, or that 6 to 8% of our human-caused greenhouse gas emissions come from food waste, or that reducing food waste is the single greatest solution to climate change, according to Project Drawdown. And it's not just an issue of food security, in that 1 in 6, 1 in 7 Americans is food insecure, and that there are something like 400 million meals that go uneaten every year just in the US as a result of food insecurity. But that it's also an issue of economics, and that the value of the food that goes to waste every year is worth about $1 trillion. And how would you use $1 trillion? Like, if you, it's not major, it's kind of like waving a magic wand, because it's $1 trillion. Like, you can do anything. You could buy Amazon if you wanted to. So if you had $1 trillion, what would you do with that money? Could we alleviate poverty? Could we make our food system more just and equitable? Could we reduce the impacts of climate change? Could we solve basically any environmental or social problem? And that's kind of the question that's posed by the upcycled food industry, is what would we do with $1 trillion worth of food? And I think the first answer, the most obvious answer, should be you definitely don't let it go into a landfill. Like, that's definitely not where you want to put your $1 trillion, is in the trash. And so throughout the rest of this kind of presentation, I can talk about the ways that people around the world are taking their slice of that pie, using it to contribute to this single greatest solution to climate change, and accomplishing whatever sort of ulterior goals they have for the world. And Monica, my major was environmental studies. Started as physics, way too hard. Dropped out of physics, went environmental studies and leadership was my minor at CU Boulder. And yeah. So I don't know, before I kind of share my screen, and does that bring up any questions or comments or anything for people? Oops. Okay, tell me if this works. Can you see? Yes, nodding. Okay. So Upcycled Food Association is a nonprofit, and our mission is to prevent food waste by growing the upcycled food economy. And of course, that begs the question, what is the upcycled food economy? What is upcycled food? And there is a technical definition that we created about a year ago, because one of the first things we realized was, well, we can't create, how could we create something called the Upcycled Food Association if no one even knows what upcycled food is? So we teamed up with a lot of really great, important people in the food waste world, like Harvard Law School, Drexel University, Natural Resources Defense Council, ReFed, World Wildlife Fund, and we created this technical definition that's kind of there as an academic and research and policy foundation. But then there's this what I think is a more important, simplified definition that I usually say, and it's that upcycled food is the way that normal people prevent food waste with the products they buy. Everyone is kind of familiar with the vote with your dollar concept. Like if you don't believe in factory farming, don't buy factory farmed meat, and you're like making a statement in that. Or if you don't like, let's see, if you want to support local farms, then like buy your food directly from local farms, right? So there's like a way that we can use our dollars to promote to align with our values. And our organization believes that people deserve the opportunity to align their dollars and their values with what happens to be the greatest solution to climate change, food waste prevention. And it's not just the greatest solution to climate change, it also happens to be sort of the most ubiquitously agreed upon environmental solution. What's your favorite environmental solution? Actually, someone please give me an example. I haven't tried this, but this should be fun. What's like an important thing that you do to help the environment? EV cars. Okay, I'm going to give you an example, Jeffrey, of how food waste is different. EV cars. I think Obama was the one who started putting these regulations in place around American car companies have to have a certain percentage of their fleet be electric vehicles by a certain date, like 2035, 50%. I'm making these numbers up, but by 2035, 50% of your cars have to be electric. And who hated that? The car companies. And they fought it. I'm sure they fought it in court, and they probably tried to get that policy repealed. And now they're like, now that, we see how successful Tesla is, and now they're sort of like realizing, oh man, we really got to do something about this. But any environmental solution out there, chances are there's a political angle to it. The dairy farmers don't want the oat milk people to call it milk. They don't want Beyond Meat to call it a burger, so they're going to fight that in court. Or the oil and gas industry really doesn't like EV cars probably either, right? They definitely don't like renewable energy very much. So there's like all these political things that exist that kind of inhibit the success of any environmental initiative or movement, except this one. Because who doesn't want to reduce food waste? And I have a number for you. There's 5% of people who said in a survey, a study that was conducted by one of our members, Matson, who did not answer the question, do you want to actively reduce food waste in your own life positively? So there's at maximum 5% of the population or so who doesn't actively want to make an effort to reduce food waste. But that's a very tiny, and you got to wonder who the hell are those people, but that's a really tiny percentage of the population. That's not like 50% that, doesn't want to use electric cars, or, that is on the political left or right. That's like 5% of people. That's the vast majority of people want to do this thing. Not only that, but it happens to be an opportunity for food businesses to just make more money, because instead of saying, hey, Chevy, you've got to invest in all this new infrastructure to make your assembly line able to create 50% of your cars that are electric instead of the way you've been making internal combustion engines for 100 years. You have to make those investments and make these changes. Or, hey, farmer, you need to invest in regenerative agriculture. all it says is take the stuff that you're wasting right now and make money off of it. So in terms of convincing the powers that be and the players in our food system to play along, we're not trying to convince anyone of anything that they don't already believe in. Just minimize your loss. It's something that every food business is already trying to do. And reduce food waste, something that apparently 95% of people want to do. And it also happens to be the greatest solution to climate change. So isn't that a big opportunity for people who want to make money and avoid global warming? We already went over all this stuff. So what's different about this solution, there's lots of ways that people prevent food waste. There is a huge industry around composting. There's a huge industry around anaerobic digestion. What else? There's like cold chain management technologies and logistics technologies that exist to prevent food waste. Does anyone else know of any other that I'm missing? There's like new technologies that we're using that use artificial intelligence to predict crop situations that to prevent waste in advance. Anyone know of any others?
Intelligent packaging, shelf life depicting systems.
Totally, yeah. Not only packaging, but like those films like Appeal Sciences is creating to make food decompose. Yeah. So there's a huge industry around reducing food waste, multifaceted, lots of different business models, lots of different areas along the supply chain that these businesses focus, except none of them focus on the most important end of the supply chain, which is consumers. And so all the industries that we've talked about so far that prevent food waste, they're all B2B essentially. And what's unique about Upcycled Food is that it's the first B2C industry that prevents food waste, the first consumer product industry, which is significant because if you look at, again, comparing this movement to other environmental movements, like using plant proteins to mimic animal proteins is not new at all. But once big consumer products like Beyond Burgers and Oatly and all the dozens that we all buy come onto the scene, that's when, in the last decade really, that's when that movement on plant-based food really gained steam. And take electric cars again, like when electric cars using an electric engine to power some kind of automobile, not new at all. Every train locomotive that you've ridden on is a diesel generator that powers an electric motor, basically. Not a new thing, but then once consumer products like Teslas come on the market, that's when like the whole movement kind of experiences this acceleration. And so our movement is undergoing our acceleration right now as food waste becomes more front of mind for everyone. And lots of businesses like the ones you see at the bottom are making predictions about what, and these are what's significant here is these are not the businesses that set predictions. These are really the ones who set trends. Like if Whole Foods says that something is going to be a trend, then it is, because they control what we see when we're in a grocery store and what products and trends we interact with as consumers. And so as more of these businesses buy into this concept, it's giving more access to upcycled products to more consumers around the world. And we are experiencing really rapid growth as an industry, and will continue to. And what we're working towards is to create a future in which, in the same way that today you can walk down any aisle of most grocery stores in this country and many other countries and find an organic version of many of the things that you're looking for, in the not too distant future, you'll be able to fill your entire cart, food for yourself, food for your pet, food for your baby, or cosmetics, beauty products, home products, with products that prevent food waste. And so in the same way that today you can buy all the meat and animal products that you used to buy, but an animal-based or a plant-based version, you'll be able to buy any product that you want, but a version that happens to prevent food waste. And before I go any further, I want to take a second because my partner always tells me I need to stop and like explain just a couple examples of what upcycled food can look like, just to like clarify that. It's so bagel chips, taking bagels that otherwise would have gone to waste and making bagel chips out of them. That's a great example. Many of our members use a byproduct from agriculture, like this company, Blue Stripes. Second most produced crop in the world is cacao. Because we eat so much chocolate, but 70% of every cacao pod is wasted. It's the husk and the fruit. And because we just take the seeds to make chocolate and we throw everything else away. Well, companies like this, and also big companies like Barry Callebaut is another member, biggest chocolate supplier in the world, Mondelez, which owns many of the chocolate brands that you would find in every grocery store in America. They're saying, how can we use that other 70%, the husk and the fruit? Why are we sweetening our chocolates with cane sugar when there's this really delicious, nutritious, super sweet fruit that comes from the same plant as the cacao seeds that we use to make the chocolate? And so they have this product. They have a ton of really cool products. This is actually a super cool company. It's called Blue Stripes. And so they're using a byproduct of agriculture, the cacao fruit. Here, actually, there's a good diagram on here. You can see that. Another byproduct of agriculture is just like the fruit and the vegetables that are otherwise lost. So the ag economist on the call knows the difference between food waste and food loss. Food loss is generally caused by like market conditions, not things that are necessarily in the control of a farmer. And so these producers in this company, AgriCycle, and their brand Jolly Fruit Company, they work with farmers across the African continent to identify areas where food is being lost, and then upcycling it into a higher value shelf stable product like this dried jackfruit. And so again, a byproduct from agriculture. There's also lots of byproducts from manufacturing, like juice pulp or spent grain from brewing beer. And if you look at our website, we have about 140 members now, and they all are doing different things, completely different products, business models. And soon, as a result of the product certification that we're creating, you'll be able to find all of not just the brands, but the products and figure out where you can buy them. And you'll be able to search for all the products by different criteria. We're building this really cool product finder tool on our website. So thanks for posting all the links for my tangents that I'm going on in here. Okay, any other thoughts or questions, diversions? Okay, so what's kind of happening with Upcycled Food Association? We're growing really fast. We set out to grow to 75 members last year. We grew to about 125, and then this year our membership will grow to about 300 or more businesses. And right now we have businesses in like 21 or 22 countries. So it really is a global movement. We already talked about this too, but the definition that we created, and there's a great infographic and paper that we co-authored on the definition, formal definition for upcycled food, which is basically, it has to have a net impact on food waste prevention, net positive impact on the environment. So like if you use if you're using like 100 pounds of upcycled food ingredients in your product every year, but then you're wasting like 1,000 pounds in production or manufacturing, then that wouldn't qualify. It's got to be net impact. But what that definition did not do was create a process by which to evaluate which products are upcycled and which are not, and to ultimately connect those products with consumers. And so to do that, we created this whole certification program, which is what Katie, is that what your name? Sorry, the thing isn't coming up. Yeah, Katie was asking about. Oops, those are just the wrong slides. So we just recently finished the standard for certification. And again, there's like lots of technical reading that can be done on that. But basically, you have to, in order to get certified, you have to prove that you're preventing a certain amount of food waste by producing this upcycled ingredient or product. And since there's food scientists on the call, it's 2 certifications. It's one for ingredients, like B2B ingredients, and one for consumer products. So it'll give ingredient suppliers and food scientists and product developers the ability to kind of increase their value prop to their CPG clients by way of saying, look, this is, if you include this ingredient, you'll be able to make this on-pack claim that it helps the environment, et cetera, et cetera. And then that product gets brought into our consumer education efforts to help increase sales of upcycled products. If you look at our OKR model for this year, it's like very bleak, where it's things like increase public awareness of upcycled products by 10%, increase the number of grocery stores that upcycled products are sold in by 10%, increase the number of grocery stores that actively call out and feature their carrying of upcycled products by 10%, increase sales by 10%. And we know that that's the right area to focus on, because there's research from that's been done from academia and from the retail industry that has shown that the more people who know what upcycled products are, the greater the demand will be. So on average, the more people who know about upcycled products, the better. Right now, I think it's like 2.6%. We just did a study about this. Less than 3% of people can say, I know that I bought an upcycled product. And so we're trying to increase that by 10% this year. And so we're doing that with partnerships with retailers and through this certification program that will put more products in front of more consumers. And this is not the logo that we're going to be using. We're actually rebranding, and we have a new logo that is specifically for the certification. So, but it's still secret and I can't show you, but this gives you the idea of, like, on your Imperfect box or on your Toast Beer or Banana Bites or whatever, you would see that this product is upcycled, and there might be other on-pack claims like this product helps to prevent X amount of food waste or X amount of CO2 emissions, things like that. So we're really on a mission right now to just get these products in front of more consumers, which is why someone should start making bagel chips, because there's this whole organization around helping to increase your sales. So whoever wants to pick up twice rounds and turn that into a viable business, there's this whole organization, this whole movement at your back working to help you increase sales. So there you go. And that's it on the Upcycled Food Association stuff. And I think I got to the status, right, Katie, of like where we're at.
Yeah.
Really the big thing right now is launching the certification program. We're also doing a couple other things in terms of bringing more financial capital into the space, attracting more investment. We're going to increase collaborations between members, sort of optimizing the supply chain a little bit better. So we're working on a few things, but the first and foremost is consumer education. Yeah.
For the companies that are a part of it, is it just that they're interested in it, or do they have to be actively like working in upcycling?
Anyone can be a member. Yeah, anyone can be a member. And we have a lot of members who are either they're like a big company that's in an exploratory phase. They're just trying to figure out like, is this something we want to invest in? Or we have a lot of members who are not food companies at all, but who provide consulting services or technology or equipment that's relevant to upcycling. So it really kind of, and then we have retailers in the membership. It kind of mirrors the conventional food supply chain itself. It's just a more sustainable version of it. And we're trying to like optimize to get the most food basically through the pipeline, connect more ingredient suppliers with food scientists, product developers, CPGs, more of those with retailers, more retailers with consumers, to increase sales of these products. And if we're successful, and I'll end on this because I forgot to put it in the slides. If we're successful, so on one of the first slides I showed that Project Drawdown lists preventing food waste as the #1 solution to climate change. And that's because between now and 2050, it has the ability to prevent about 87 gigatons of CO2 equivalent emissions, which is more than any other solution. That's like how it ended up there. And so if you take that number, 87 gigatons of carbon emissions, and you look at the amount of emissions that the upcycled industry will save over that time period as well, if UFA is hitting its goals, then what it accounts for is about 4%. So if we're successful, we'll be accountable for about 4% of the entire, and there's also a UN Sustainable Development Goal around reduction of food waste. And we would also account for a significant percentage of that goal as well. So that, I say that just to show that like, when this is a really potent space for innovation and impact, when you're making whole percentage point impact on climate change, as like one industry that tens of thousands of different industries and businesses are working towards. So yeah, and I'll leave it at that. And I think someone else was going to ask a question before I hold on.
I had a quick question. I was just wondering about where in kind of the food life cycle do you guys stop, or do you target kind of everything? So for example, I'm thinking of like farmers who won't even harvest their crops because prices are low or whatever it may be. Where's kind of the point that you guys target, and or is there a point at which you guys kind of target, or are you guys thinking about expanding? Or
so we don't target any part of the supply chain. Our members are kind of across the whole supply chain. So like the products that I showed you earlier, those are sort of post-harvest or on-farm losses. Something that has to happen with upcycled food, and this was part of the definition that we came up with, is that you can't just like take an apple off of a tree in an orchard that apple wasn't going to get sold because of market conditions and then like take it and say like, here, it's an upcycled apple. You have to add value to that apple. And so whether you add value to that apple by turning it into a shelf stable item, or maybe, there's a case to be made, TBD, because the certification hasn't been tested this way yet, that adding value could be like combining that apple with a bunch of other rescued produce from other farms and aggregating it into like a more useful grocery box or something like that. But you have to add value to it somewhere. So there's lots of our members that are taking otherwise lost food directly from farms and upcycling it into useful ingredients and higher value products. There's also people in manufacturing, like the pulp from oat milk production. We have a member that makes a flour out of that. Spent brewer's grain. We have a few members that make stuff out of that. It's sort of, I guess this is a more straightforward answer to your question. It sort of ends after manufacturing. Like there's no one who's taking, actually that's not true. There's a company that's taking waste that's not able to be donated from retailers and using it to make like a fertilizer and an animal feed. And so that is like the one example of someone who's taking food out of the supply chain at the retail level. But that's sort of an outlier. Everyone else is like manufacturing and up.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question. So most of the upcycled food companies that I've seen are relatively small sized. Have you seen any interest from bigger food companies at all, or are they trying to make these products? Do you think that would be successful? Would they sell more or have a bigger impact than smaller companies?
Yeah. In some ways, yes, they can have a bigger impact because, if you have a big distribution, then you can increase your sales and then you can prevent more food waste because you're selling more of the upcycled product. And because it's set up in a way where for every upcycled product sold, there is a net food waste prevention. The more the sales, then the more the food waste prevention. And so big companies are attracted to this because the same goes in the other direction. Like if you're a big company, if you waste 0.001% of billions of tons of food or whatever, billions of pounds for one company, then that's a ton of food over the course of a year, right? So that's why, like I said, Barry Callebaut, world's biggest chocolate supplier, other ingredient companies like Griffith Foods and IFF, two of the biggest names in the biz, they're both members, and they're kind of working their way through creating and marketing upcycled ingredients. And then now we're starting to see big CPGs too, like Dole is a member, Mondelez, other companies have big distribution. Danone just came out. They're not a member, but they just come out with an upcycled yogurt product. And that's really exciting because I think that what will really make this industry accelerate even more is when we don't start seeing just things like cacao shell flour cookies that are kind of like niche and they're delicious, but it's not like an Oreo that 90% of Americans are going to recognize. And we start moving into a space where the Oreo, like the branded Oreo, which is a Mondelez company, by the way, includes even a small percentage of upcycled ingredients. And that's really where the power comes from, is when we can start to integrate this virtue, which is basically just a virtue of efficiency. Like, use all of the stuff that you already made before you go out and deforest more of the Amazon to make room for more agriculture for our growing population. Like, let's use the food that we're already producing to the best of our ability, because we're not doing that right now. That's like really where the power is. So excited to see more big companies join.
I have a question. So about the certification or the standard for upcycle, does that mean like what kind of things it need to meet to be eligible for upcycling? Is that the meaning? Like, you're developing a system for food that should be approved. So my question is because, there are so many diverse different kind of food, they're packaged and produced in different ways. So I'm also imagine if there are many different upcycling ways, how do you, can you like give me some examples for that standard, a little bit more details? And also I'm wondering, this certification, because usually in my mind, I feel like certification sort of proved by some, or it's based on this Upcycled Association, the association approved this certificate and make it the first one standard in this industry. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so that second part, first, we convened the committee that created the standard, and we're the ones who license out the branding for the certification, but the actual auditing is done by a third party, which is how the USDA organic program works and how non-GMO works, and other ones like like fair trade. So while we're kind of the central body to that manages the program, we don't actually do the auditing ourselves. So that's like done by a third party, which is good because that makes it more credible. These are our members, so we want to make sure that it's legit and that we don't have like bias there, basically. So, and if that didn't answer your question, let me know. And then for the first part, around the standard, you're right. There's tons of different ways to upcycle. There's tons of for every product, there's a byproduct, and that means that there's that's a potentially upcyclable ingredient. And so with all that diversity, how do you kind of create something that applies to everyone? And for us, it's really, the bottom line is food waste prevention. So if you can prove that regardless of where the food is coming from or what the byproduct or where in the supply chain it was coming from or anything like that, if you can prove that we divert, I think for small businesses that have like a small distribution, it's tiered. So for the lowest level, it's like 5 tons. Yeah, 5 tons of food. Otherwise wasted food is being prevented from being wasted every year as a result of creating that product. Then we will certify it. And so it's the common denominator is food waste prevention, regardless of like the great diversity of products that exist out there. Does that answer that question?
Can you clarify one more thing? So
yeah,
in the beginning, like you take some measurements to prevent food waste, that's also considered as upcycling? Because I'm still not sure the meaning or definition of upcycling, I guess. Yeah.
Well, it's if you use, oh, okay, I see. So if you're using an ingredient that otherwise would have gone to what's called a food waste destination, which is everything from animal feed to landfill. If you're taking, and you can verify that your product, the ingredient that you're using was going to one of those destinations before, and now it's not, that's sort of the definition. So if you as a beer producer can say like, hey, before we were taking all of our spent grain and sending it to animal feed, now, which is according to the World Resources Institute, a food waste destination, now we're sending it to this company that's making flour out of it, then that would probably qualify.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And then there's a question in the chat. Has any upcycled product been successful? How has the uptake rate been? Profitability wise, yeah, and you're totally right. If people don't buy the products, then they're wasted again. And the short answer is yes. Like, a lot of these companies have been successful. Some of the ones that you will recognize will be like Imperfect Foods. You might have just heard they raised about $110 million the other day. So they're very much up and coming. Barnana is a company that is now nationwide, and you more than likely have seen their products in a grocery store. So, and there are, probably a dozen more that have like reached that level of success. But generally, it's also true that these companies are young. And so we're trying to provide technical assistance to help them get connected with the capital that they need and the other resources that they need to be successful. And ultimately, it all comes down to how we message. There's a lot of research that's been done on like the consumer messaging psychology of this. And the way that we increase consumers' willingness to pay to the greatest degree is by using rational, non-emotional, quantitative arguments, messages. So by saying things like, hey, this product helps to prevent X amount of pounds of food waste or X amount of pounds of carbon emissions, that's how we get consumers to increase their willingness to pay for upcycled products the most. And so we as the association are trying to coordinate this big set of businesses to all basically use the same messaging strategy so that we can amplify one another's work and increase willingness to pay more. So a lot of these business models are still being tested basically, but especially as big companies integrate upcycled ingredients into their current products that people already buy, it poses a big opportunity to basically just make those products more sustainable and also provide some clarity that the upcycled movement can be successful, basically.
Maybe I'll jump in with a question. Sure. Most of us associated with food science deal with the product literally at or near the end of the food cycle, the food system, right? Food chain. I think you acknowledged earlier that a significant amount of food waste occurs after the food is delivered to the consumer. And your system would capture that food waste and upcycle, I believe. So the question is, how do we justify investing more energy and water and money to upcycle something that we shouldn't waste in the first place?
Yeah, great question. And something to clarify is that our members generally definitely do not take food that reaches the consumer and use that food that does reach the consumer, but then is wasted from after it's been purchased by a consumer, and upcycle that. So yes, consumers themselves are the worst offenders as a category in terms of who wastes the most food, more than retailers, more than farmers themselves. And
but still the bread that you mentioned earlier is ready to be consumed by the bought or consumed by the consumer. So we've already invested water, energy, everything in that bread, and now it's being wasted. Can we not find a way to reduce that waste?
Yeah, well, I think that the premise is that it all comes down to preservation, essentially. If no food had an expiration date, then no food would ever go to waste, right?
Yeah, you're talking to the area that we're focusing on. That's getting rid of this crazy system of code dating everything. Those are real dates.
Right. Yeah,
So
and I think
that's the problem that really would reduce food waste.
Right. And I think though the case is that, you know, to upcycle that is that from an economics lens, if there is a surplus of bread, which there is, one way to address that is to just produce less bread, right? That would be like one way of just very straightforward prevent food waste. But because consumers love to see a big abundant bread section, and there's also studies that have been done that show like even if you produce less bread and have less in your bread section, you're still going to waste generally the same portion, because once there's only one loaf left on the counter, consumers don't want to touch it. You don't want to touch the last loaf. And because so there's like some consumer fickleness in there too. So as long as that psychology is a part of the equation, the premise is that, okay, we can take that stuff that is going to waste and add a little bit more energy and water and time and labor, and reduce the waste by making a higher value product out of it. And I see you shaking your head. It's not upcycled. It does not meet the definition of upcycled if it does not have a net positive impact. So you could take all the bread and put, you know, it into a toaster that's powered off of whale oil and super inefficient practices to toast it into a bagel chip. And if you weren't having a net positive impact, then it would not meet the definition of upcycled food.
Yep.
And so that's kind of our way of disincentivizing those practices that are going to ultimately use more energy than they're worth.
Yeah. Interesting equation. I think there's many, many dimensions to it that we really need to explore. Why do we overproduce? I mean, I think you've explained it kind of in an interesting way, but in many ways, that's part of what we should probably put more emphasis on consumer education. And
oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Recognize that, and maybe even food is too cheap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's been a couple people, like especially the chefs in the food waste movement, who have said like food is definitely too cheap. And so especially the really unhealthy food that causes health problems and environmental degradation, we should stop, the subsidies that support the, overabundance of this somewhat harmful practices in food. That's, like one way of looking at it. And so, yeah, I think the interesting thing about the upcycled movement, though, is that it gives a basis to reach a lot of consumers with these sorts of messages. And even though we're not out there actively advocating for, hey, buy less, go to the grocery store more often, all of the other things that consumers can do to reduce their own waste, this gives us a basis on which to mount a lot of those messages to consumers and just raise the awareness generally about reducing food waste as a consumer. And so I've rambled on 3 minutes past our scheduled time.
Yeah.
Really
I
nice to
don't
meet
want to
everyone.
take up too much of your time. Thank you. Thank you so much for talking to us. This was a very insightful conversation. And we hope to see you soon with bagel chip updates.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nice to meet everyone. And let me just post really quick. One of the best ways, or actually you can give it out to the rest of the group. Best way to keep up with us is on our newsletter and LinkedIn. So maybe if there's a post that you could send out to the group afterwards, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
But thanks so much for the invite. Nice to see you.